Scholars. This is going to be our second part in our series on personal insight questions, or PIQs. What are the PIQs? The PIQs are the questions that are asked of you to help complete the UC application for the UC schools in California. So from a series of 8 questions, you will be asked to pick 4, and in each question you have 350 words to kind of fully answer that question. So you might be asking yourself, what is the purpose of PIQs? And this is directly from the UCs, but it really helps to provide context to your application. It allows you to advocate for yourself. It completes a picture of you as an applicant, because they'll have your grades, your GPA, the courses that you took, but that's all very black and white. And really, the personal insight questions bring color and personality into your application, and it helps set you apart as a student. So how do we even get started? The first things first is it's a process, and giving yourself time to draft and think about it is one of the best things you can do. I really want to dispel the notion that this has to be your best writing or the best writing in the world. It doesn't. It just has to be clear. Approach it like you would any other writing assignment. Use the steps. Go through pre-write, plan and outline, draft again, and redraft. This is not something that people sit down and they're like, great, I'm going to answer this question. Done, check. It's something that you take time to read over, to sit with. Did I answer all the aspects of the question? Can I revise this? These are kind of the questions you should be asking, and as Upward Bound, we're happy to help you throughout the process, and we're happy to help you read it over just to make sure it's the best that we can get it. Again, not the world's best writing, but just making sure that we're answering these questions, because they're a little tricky. So now on to the questions. There's 8 of them. You only need to pick 4, and pick the 4 that make the most sense for you. But I'm going to read them through and kind of talk about different aspects of each question. So for number 1, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. This one's a little tricky because students tend to want to talk about the club that they were in or the leadership experience that they had rather than their leadership experience. So you have to focus on you, what you've done, the positive impact you've made on others, how you have contributed to group efforts over time, or resolved disputes. Do not focus on what your club did or, all of the different things that you might have done in your leadership experience. Really focus on 1 or 2 examples, because you only have 350 words, so you really want to go into a deep dive with your words rather than a whole bunch of shallow dives. Number 2, every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. So this is a great one to kind of talk about. You can talk about something that you do. If you use STEM and you're like, I creatively solved this problem with my computer, or I created an app, or I did this or that, you can talk about an artistic mode. But you have to talk about how you express yourself through it rather than the mode itself. So, for example, if I were to pick writing, I wouldn't talk about the process of writing, but I would talk about how I express myself through writing, what I put into my writing. So it's very you-based. They want to learn more about you rather than the creativity itself. Number 3, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed or redeveloped that talent over time? So this is one where you want to kind of detail how you discovered that talent or skill and what you put into it and what you plan to do in the future. So I once had a student that wrote about their ability to do impressions and talked all about how they honed that skill and that craft. They've learned from other people about comedic timing, about how to use different inflections of their voice. So really go into detail with that one. Number 4, describe how you've taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you faced. Again, this is a tricky question, but a really rewarding one to write about. So if you were to pick, for example, Upward Bound, you would talk about how you took advantage of Upward Bound. Don't just talk about the Upward Bound program or what we offer, but really focus on, I attended tutoring. I went to the 6-week summer program. This is what I did and I contributed. And again, with the educational barrier, the key word in this question is overcome. So you really want to focus how you've overcome the educational barrier rather than the educational barrier itself. Again, these questions are worded a little tricky, but the goal is to answer them clearly, concisely, and to really focus on those keywords like that word overcome. Continuing on, question 5. Describe the most significant challenge you've faced and the steps you've taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? So this is a good one, for example, if your grades might have dipped during this period of online learning, that was a challenge. It affected your academic achievement. But really, again, the key word is overcome. So you would talk about what you've done to overcome this challenge. I went to tutoring online. I advocated for myself with my teachers. I joined Think Together and we worked on things in person. I really worked to create like a group with my friends and we studied together. What have you done to overcome this challenge? Number 6, think about an academic subject that inspires you. Describe how you furthered your interest inside or outside of the classroom. This is a great one if you are going into an impacted major like psychology or engineering. It's a really great way to show that you have a vested interest in that subject, and this is what you've done inside the class or outside. So, for example, if we're talking about psychology, a good thing would be to take that AP Psych class that's offered at your school. Another thing would be like, hey, I applied to Citrus, I did dual enrollment, and I took a psychology course. Or I kind of shadowed and learned more about what psychologists do. So there's a lot of different things you can do inside and outside of the classroom. You can join clubs, all of these different things to kind of show your academic interest. Number 7, what have you done to make your school or community a better place? Again, this is only 350 words, so it's better to focus on one example and to talk about it in depth rather than a whole bunch of smaller examples because it really doesn't allow you to build on your writing. And last but not least, number 8, beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admissions at the University of California? This is a good one. Again, they were talking about self-advocacy. To advocate for yourself as being a great candidate for this system. So these are the questions. I want to give you some examples of how they were answered and how you pick them. So first and foremost, pick the questions that you have the most to say about. There is no value in picking one question over the other. Next, pick questions that highlight something that you have not yet talked about. So if every question, for example, you talk about Upward Bound, that's probably not showing all that you are as a student because you do a lot more than just Upward Bound. So we want to show all the different aspects off. Your academic interests, your artistic and creativity, things that you've done outside the classroom, how you've made your community a better place. Focus on different aspects to show yourself as a whole student rather than just one aspect. Last but not least, pick questions that showcase your strengths or skills. If you're not an artistic person or a creative person, you don't have to pick that question if it doesn't correlate to your personal experience. Again, there's 8 questions. You only have to pick 4. Pick the 4 that work best for you. When writing the questions, it's best to be clear. The strongest applications have clear writing that are concise, so you're not kind of rambling on, but really focusing about yourself and talking about something new and different in each question so that you're not talking about the same thing over and over and over again. Don't write complicated or unclear, hard to follow. This should not be like fictitious writing. It is your story. You really want to be as clear as possible. Don't talk about the same thing in each question. Don't talk about what the program does or what your club does, rather how you took advantage of it. So I'm going to read, these are real examples given at the 2019 Counselor Conference for the University of California. They have the word count on there. If you don't make it up to the 350 words per question, that is okay. But let's read this one through and then we'll kind of talk about if it was strong or not as strong. So, case 1, leadership. During the summer of this year, senior year, I applied to the summer staff position at our school offered for seniors to help freshmen transition from middle school to high school. I realized that being a leader wasn't as easy as it sounded. My time with the freshmen made me realize who I am and who I want to become. Everything that I thought would go wrong went wrong. I had to understand these freshmen were in a completely new environment that they had to adapt to. Over the next few hours, I gathered all my thoughts and tried to recall my experience as a freshman and relate it back to the current situation. Now I have a better understanding of where everyone is coming from. I figured that stubbornness played a big role in their attitude, so I shared my experiences of being a freshman, which got the freshman students to understand the importance of this event. This experience helped me realize that the leaders have to be patient in order to get their point across. Okay, so that one they said is a missed opportunity, and I think you can understand why. It didn't really showcase this student. It didn't talk about them. It talked about what their role of leadership was and kind of the experience and how it was difficult to navigate, but they didn't showcase themselves as a leader. They didn't showcase who they are. And so they elaborated more on what went wrong and how they found a solution to fix it, but really I want to see more details about their role, their idea of leadership, and who they are, because I feel like I read that, but in that 180 words, I didn't know much about that student. Let's read another one. This one is also focused on leadership. During the presidential election, the nation continued to deepen its polarization, resulting in a hostile political climate and unprecedented fear in those without legal status. In the midst of this crisis, I became part of an initiative to formulate a project that would help students who found themselves in the state of insecurity. For months, I met with representatives from community organizations, with fellow peers to come up with an efficient and prolonged solution to the issue. We began drafting a resolution to make my school district a sanctuary district. This was only part of the initiative as I worked to gather more members of the community who would contribute to the project by helping spark public interest in the idea. Once formalizing the language to satisfy the interests of the students, my team and I moved to propose the resolution to the school board district. Beginning the campaign rally and continuing with the public comment and ending with reading a proposal, we made sure that we were representing every step of the way. Eventually, the resolution made it to my school district, a sanctuary district, and it was passed unanimously. So this one's only 191 words. The last one was 180 words, but this one added value. I could tell what the student was passionate about. It goes from a broad context to a very specific context about their process. They provide concrete examples of the leadership and how they made their community a better place. It was clear, concise, and direct. This one you could tell, even just from the language, that they had drafted multiple times, and so it was something that really showed that effort. So those are just two examples of how the PIQs, and I would say that first one, that case one, is a first draft. We could have added more to hear about it, and this can become a strong PIQ. It just wasn't quite there when they submitted it. So we want to take advantage and add value to our application with our PIQs. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help, but that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for listening.